shit what I say now, boss. The spirit and the flesh, the emotions that arrest. The cerebral will contest, propelling the unrest. Preachers and bandits with means underhanded. The teachers pedantic and lack understanding. So sweep out the sand with the broom in your hand. Stand up, make we burn Babylon. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demons searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Cause I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demons searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Trembling in the haze with the semblance of a blaze. With gratitude and rage, we touch another page. With delirious delight, impervious to light. This vitality and might encourages the flight. Preachers and bandits with means underhanded. The teachers pedantic and lack understanding. So sweep out the sand with the broom in your hand. Stand up, make we burn Babylon. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you lurking, demons searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demons searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. The world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demons searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Cause I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demons searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what dwells behind the curtain. The face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners. Go. Run, 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 make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling out your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, come, make we get it. Calling out your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. And just like that, I cut it off right in the middle. No, 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 Shozan. Today you're not getting the full song. You're not. But you know what? Maybe I might give you a little a cappella. Today we're talking about nature. And this is a song, not one of my songs, but one that reminds me of nature and time. Nature and the changes and the seasons and so on and so forth. Okay? How about that? How about that, Dr. Thunder? How about that, Devil's Bane? How about that, everyone? Welcome, 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 welcome. Try to remember the kind of September when life was slow and oh so mellow. Try to remember the kind of September when grass was green and grain was yellow. Try to remember the kind of September when you were a tender and callow fellow. Try to remember, and if you remember, then follow. Huh. Try to remember the kind of September when no one wept except the willow. Try to remember the kind of September when dreams were kept beside your pillow. Try to remember the kind of September when, aha, love was an ember about to billow. Try to remember, and if you remember, then follow. Welcome, one and all. Welcome, Snuggles in the house. Showzan, Dr. Thunder, Mr. Devil's Bane in the house. Deep in December, it's nice to remember, although you know the snow will follow. Deep in December, it's nice to remember, without a hurt, the heart is hallowed. Deep in December, it's nice to remember the fire of September that made you mellow. Deep in December, our hearts will remember and follow. Yes, nature, as I said, nature is harsh in its realities. It is tyrannical in its judgments. Nature constrains, constricts, and limits. To have a nature is to have a definition, and to have a definition is to be non-contradictory to that definition. You cannot be X and also W, Y, Z, and A and B. However, modernity, the Enlightenment, the modern political project, the scientific revolution writ large, if you will, is an attempt to push back on nature and say, hey, 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 nature, this harsh mother nature, let's push back on you a little bit with our technology and with our political arrangements so that we can create some space for freedom, some space for equality. Hence, there is a natural tension between freedom, equality, and nature, is there not? Welcome, 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 ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my channel. My name is Ike Ogiamin, and over here we talk about being better and doing better. And what are we doing today? Today, we are addressing, exploring this question of nature, the tensions between nature and modernity through the lens of modern relationships, through the lens of the modern woman, if you will. And we have joining us today Chantel Simone, a fellow YouTuber out here in these YouTube streets. How are you doing, Chantel? You are muted.
You can hear me now.
Yes, I can.
All right. Hi, how are you guys doing? Happy Tuesday. Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. You are most welcome. So let's just go right into it. And let me ask you this. Do you agree with the premise that there is a tension between modernity and nature in general?
I agree in general, yes.
And if so, like, how does that manifest itself, both, let's say, in your life or in the life of your peers, especially when it comes to relationships, or modern roles, or what you may consider natural to you as a woman, for
So
example?
there is a war, for lack of better words. I can speak for myself personally. I don't want to speak for other Black women, but I know when I hit a certain age and my bio clock started ticking, my instinct started saying, okay, your body is meant to start reproducing, start nurturing, start breastfeeding. But society was telling me that I need to go out and further my education and move up in my company. There was an internal war that I've had to face to decide what path will bring me the most happiness and the most fulfillment.
I see. Now, when you say society, um, through what organs, through what means? Was it family? Was it the media? Was it marketing? Was it your friends? Whom exactly was creating this tension in you?
It was many different avenues. My family, each avenue had a different intention. So
Mm,
my mom and my aunt who raised me was a single parent, raised me by themselves. So they taught me to go out and have an education, never depend on a man, never put a man above my education. The media taught me that I'm supposed to be independent and a boss, and if I'm not, then I have no ambition. And friends with their accomplishments telling me, "Oh, girl, let's go out, let's have a hot girl summer." And if I was to ever express interest in wanting to something simple as staying at home with my boyfriend, or wanting to choosing to hang out with my boyfriend over my girlfriends, was a huge argument. Was, I've lost friends. I've personally lost friends because I chose boyfriends, relationships over hot girl summer. Um, so it was all different
mm,
avenues, just forcing, beating that drum of feminism, beating that drum of being strong, independent, and have your own. Never work with a man. Never have to depend on a man. Do yours. Do you. Do your own.
So, family, you have friends, and then on the other side of the ledger, right? You talk
Mhm.
about your nature, your instincts. Was that the only other side that was, playing the other tune, or where
It
else
was.
did you really?
Yeah, I mean, coming from a third world country, um, into the land of opportunity, the opportunity was to have the highest education I could have, to work at the best company and make as much as I can to help family back home. There was nobody there. There's nobody telling me to learn how to be a wife, or to be more feminine, or even the characteristics of a traditional woman. Like, everybody, thinking back on it, like every person in my life that I look up to was all telling me to stay in school, go further education, go work for this company. No one was putting any emphasis on being a wife, or learning how to be a wife, or learning how to work with a man.
Hmm. Two things jumped out to me there. There's emphasis, and then there's the learning, right?
Mhm.
So, because, if I were to ask you, for example, is there a real contradiction, or is it a question of emphasis? Is there a real contradiction, or is it a question of timing? In other words, let's say we wanted to create the scenario where you could possibly have it all, or maybe have 80% of all you want. Nobody ever gets all of it, of whatever, right? But how would one go about doing it? Let's say, because obviously black or white tends to be the wrong answer. And I like that you mentioned emphasis. So that you mentioned emphasis, you mentioned learning, and I'm asking now, is there a way of perhaps using timing, prioritizing one and then the other, something like that? What do you have to say about that?
So that will be tricky, because if we could say we want the best of both worlds, say I wanted to have because I went up to my master's level, so said I wanted to have an MBA, and I also wanted to have a family. The tricky part about it is I earned my bachelor's degree at 21. I worked in the business field for a while, and then I went back to school at around 25 to further my education. My master's degree program was 2 years. Now, as we know about the biological clock, at 27 is when it started ticking. So for me personally, I once I had my degree at 27, I had to use my degree. I mean, I spent $60,000 on a degree. So I mean, between 27 and now I'm 29, almost 30, using my degree, then my clock is almost like, there's almost time out, because then if I want 2 to 3 kids, I know high risk pregnancies at 35. So it's tricky. You talk about the timing, because it's like, it kind of, and I don't want to use the word impossible, because if you know if I knew ahead of time, then I'll probably did my bachelor's and my master's together. That way I would be done with the program at 25, and I could still have my kids and do my family at 26, 27. But it so happened that if you think of the timeline, school timeline, taking a break between bachelor's and master's to get the real work, real learn work experience, and then going back to school, it all falls in a timeline where the emphasis, the attention that's placed in learning, studying, that attention should have been placed in learning how to be a wife, in meeting your husband, in learning the skills, trying to get on your husband's page before the kids come. Because then now I'm in a situation where I am thinking about having my kids while trying to work to get on his page, while trying to become a wife, while trying to do all these things, but not wanting my degree to just be over here not doing anything. So if we really were to take a step back and think about things, it's like to get the best of both worlds, you're running yourself thin, and it's best if we just choose one and go in the direction of one.
Okay. What if what if I were to say, okay, one of them perhaps has a time limit on it, right? You mentioned a clock, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another one. Let's say it's education, accomplishments, travel, whatever it may be. Those don't have a time limit on them, do they? You may see where I'm going here now, right? Isn't that a plausible route where you do one and then you do the other?
Well, I mean, then it would depend, because it depends, because then it's one somewhat have a time limit on it. Because if you, I know I want kids, I know I wanted marriage, then at what point would I have the hot girl summer or the traveling if I knew that I wanted kids? Because I was either in school studying, so I couldn't travel, so I would have to put off my travel to the time when it's like, okay, the clock is ticking, you need to get it together now if you want kids. If you say there's kind of a time limit on it, because we can say, okay, let's put off the hot girl summer until after graduation, but that's the time you're supposed to be having kids. And then if you choose to put off your kids, then you run high risk pregnancy.
Okay. So let's say it's education versus family. And I were to say, okay, well, go ahead, start in that first 2 years of your, college degree, your undergrad, right? You're looking for the husband. You're, as you mentioned, trying to be on the man's page and so on and so forth. And then you get married. Okay, senior year, something like that. And later on, so let's say you completely forego the hot girl summer. We put it to we bury, we do a funeral, we do our funeral rites for it, and we mourn for a month. We wear all black and all that. But if you wanted to come back and get the masters, do this, do that, start a business, like my mom got a law degree after she did nursing initially, and then she got a law degree in her 40s, and did many other things afterwards. So how about that path?
If you're right, because then going back to then, okay, so there isn't a time limit if you choose to start your career later. But then the question is asked, how far can you get in your career at an older age? Like your mom going back for her law degree at 40, when that's 20 years before retirement. What's retirement is like 60, 65. So that's 20. Like how far are you planning on getting in your career when starting that late? So for me, I knew that, well, back then I wanted to get to a certain point in my career. So I knew, okay, going back to school at 25, getting the degree by 27, that gives me a good amount of years to move up into my company. So by the time I'm like 40, I'll be at top, as opposed to waiting, having my family, then starting my career, waiting until my kids are in school so I can go back to school, and then starting my career and moving up in the company. So it's kind of two sides to the same coin there.
So in your channel, and you may, well, let me ask you, and for those of you who do not know about Chantel's channel, go ahead and check out her channel. It's her if you will, is on the title of this stream. Go ahead and click Chantel Simone, and subscribe, please. Subscribe, hit the bell button, and hit all. So it's like, subscribe, bell button, all, LBSA or LBAS, something like that. Go ahead and do that. But if you were to characterize your channel and what you do there, uh, what would you say?
So I mostly encourage Black women to think things through. If we want to simple it down, many of us did not have an opportunity to think things through because, as we said earlier, there was pressure from families telling us to go get an education, so you don't have to depend on a man. And then there's pressure from the media pushing this sex and the city lifestyle, the hot girl summer lifestyle. You don't need a man. And so there's pressure from everywhere else. No one is telling us, okay, if you want kids, if you want a husband, you're going to have to take the necessary steps to get you to where you want to go. And I know for me, I knew I wanted to get married at 27, but up until 26, I never put any extra thought in how. Like, it was just like, oh, I will get married at 27 and it's just going to happen. But, no preparation, no going out dating, no dating. I took a year off dating at 26. So it's like, it logically didn't make sense if that's the outcome you want. And I even touch on this whole idea of going back to school. Now, I know I don't want to have to work. I don't want to have a career in business when I'm a mom. So then it's like, okay, so why did I go back to school to get a master's in business if I know I don't want to use it? So it's just to encourage women to think things through a little bit more logically, and when it comes to dating and relationships.
Help women think things through more logically. Now, so if one of the women in your channel were to call up, email you, ask you regarding this timeline which we're talking about, right? And I'm going to mention something about this don't depend on a man thing. That seems to be a... anyway, so we have talked around it, but then what would be the practical piece of advice there? Because I was kind of going for, okay, you do one because that one does have a time limit. You can't have kids forever. But, you could live pretty long, and you can even have fantasies about medical technology kind of improving in terms of your lifespan, being an average of 110. And I'll have 50 years of a career, or maybe blah, 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 blah. And also maybe be able to maximize my ability to find that kind of guy that will make it such that my life may be easier than not, and so on and so forth. But anyways, what would you say to one of these women in your channel, right?
Asking for advice?
Yes.
Yeah, I would 100% let them know. I don't regret going to school. I don't regret going to for my bachelor's, my undergrad. That was a perfect opportunity to network. That was a perfect opportunity to meet people. I would recommend, though, during that time, not only study, but also network to meet people. Not look for your husband, but put yourself out there so you know that, okay, after college, that's going to be my next step. Because, if you graduate at like 21, 22, and you're dating someone, then, but for me, the mistake I made was I was in college, don't focus on boys. And then after college, it was, okay, I'm moving up in my company, don't focus on boys. And then after my company, I went back to school, don't focus on boys. So where that doesn't make any sense. So I would push more of I'm focusing on boys, and I use that term freely, not to say be loose and just be fast, but think things through more. If you know that you want to get married, focus on your studies, but also go out there to meet people.
Okay. Don't need no man. Don't depend on no man. I'm not going to characterize perhaps the reasons why that may be the case, but what in your mind, what are the reasons for that particular admonishment, that piece of advice, and so on and so forth? Where is it coming from?
Well, I think it's mostly fear-based. Not having, I don't want to speak for especially being an immigrant. I know I get a lot of comments on my page where it's like, oh, you're not American, you can't speak on this. so I tend to just speak on my personal experience, and then if anybody can relate, they relate. So for me, the woman who raised me, so when I was living in Jamaica, I wasn't raised by my bio mom. I was raised by an aunt. And both her and my mom gave me the same dating advice to not depend on a man. So from both of them, it seems as though it was more fear-based because they never witnessed a positive representation of a man. They've never had an opportunity for a man to come in, and a man that they can rely on, a man that they can let their guards around and they can depend on. So they pass on the message to say, hey, you don't ever want to be in a situation where you need a man and he's not reliable and he doesn't come through. So in that case, never be in a situation to need a man. So then that's when they pushed me to go to school, get your education, do all these things so you will never have to depend on a man. So I think it's mostly fear-based, mostly.
It's mostly fear-based, and they didn't see any, as you put it, a good representation of either a man or a good relationship. And they were probably, so the generation prior to them also had some kind of a fear-based mindset, if you will, that
Yes.
was inculcated in them. So
Yes.
when you now say, well, women should think it through and so on and so forth, and we understand that this fear is really strong, how could in other words, let me just ask this question. Do you think anything can go back? Is the horse already out of the barn? The milk is already spilled. The cat is out of the bag. Whatever metaphor you want to use there. Is it too late? Or what kind of change are you hoping to see, and that perhaps your YouTube channel is part of? Like, what are you trying to see? What would you hope for?
So especially like self-reflecting and seeing my change, my personal change in myself. I hate to say that there is no hope for Black women. I do believe that you have to want to find a solution. And it came to the point for me, I was just frustrated with my dating patterns. And in knowing about, I know a lot of people don't believe in the law of attraction, but I do. So in knowing that I attract who and what I am, and my life, if I believe in the God that I believe in, and that God sends me things that I asked for, and I wasn't asking for these relationship patterns, but I was getting them, I had to do the inner work. So I believe that it's going to take women, specifically Black women, getting to the point of realizing that they are in control of their life and stop blaming outside factors, but looking within. So that I do believe that there's some hope. My channel, I'm hoping somebody come over and the light bulb go off in their head and say like, oh wait, I am responsible for my life. I am the one in charge of the outcomes in my life. So let me stop blaming. Let me stop living in fear base. Let me start finding solutions and brainstorming how I can better myself so I can attract better. And then not only that, but we can't say we want something specific or we want something super great, but we are not great ourselves. So to start doing the work and becoming the best version of ourselves. So when we do meet that partner, when we do meet that person, that we're loosely, I say, good enough for that person that we want.
You said quite a bit there. Let me read some of these super chats. Shout out to L. Nixon. L. Nixon in the house. Thank you very much for your $10 super chat. Said, haven't tuned in a while, but I'm back. Always great to hear your content. Also, Chantel Simone is one of my favorite. Much love and blessings to you. Now, Snuggles, I believe, also left a super chat here. I'm going to go ahead and find hers. Snuggles, what's she saying? What crazy stuff is Snuggles saying this time? It will be interesting where a Caribbean and an African have a segment about living in America and the difference they learned from. Interesting. Yeah, maybe that the next time you come on the channel. Yeah, we'll talk about that. It was interesting when you were mentioning you not being American and you getting pushed back on you. It's all good. Don't worry. We're both immigrants. We can we'll stand strong together against the barrage of attacks if they do come. So you mentioned a couple of things here about agency, right? You are in control of your life. You attract what you put out. You can't ask for all these things if you're not them yourself, if you will. You see, there's something about freedom which is rather expensive, in the sense that it now makes you responsible, right? So let's say if it were to go to the other extreme and it was like, okay, well, it's an arranged marriage situation. Things are very traditional. You go from here, hand it to over to that other place, and then boom, okay, things work out, or you live with the consequences. But when there is a lot of freedom, and that's why I like to juxtapose it between there's nature on one hand, right, and then there is freedom and equality, which is more or less, let's say, more of a Western thing, and which we also appreciate because nature can be harsh, right? So we want to create some space for freedom and some space for equality. Um, However, when it comes to, I'm going to take it a step back now to that thing about accomplishments. Let me ask you this question. What about you would you like your man to admire? Or what is it in terms of, is it accomplishments, education, and so on and so forth? Are those
Okay.
important that, what I want, my man to see me as being an accomplished woman, not a, because again, femininity is heavily denigrated. It's femininity equals barefoot and pregnant, right? Female nature equals, oh, she's a dumb whatever, right? And it's not men saying this, by the way. It's a certain political movement, a certain kind of project, if you will. So let me ask: is it important, being a modern woman, you're in this particular milieu, freedom and equality is important. You are the type that obviously you're a successful woman. You've accomplished a few things. Is it important to you that your man admires, recognizes, sees that in you? Well, what do you have to say around that topic?
So that's a very good question. Before, having my degrees and my certifications and all my accomplishments, I would bring that to the table. I would use that to impress my men I'm dating, and I would, we would like them to be impressed by my degrees and the fact that I have all this success.
Hmm.
Now, learning what I'm learning, I'm doing the inner work to become the best version of myself. The thing that I would like my man to be impressed by is my willingness to learn, my willingness to get on his page, because I think that's rare, especially coming from a woman who was a PhD to one who would want to lean more in a traditional view. So I no longer use my success and my accomplishments as a badge of honor to say, hey, look at me, choose me because I have a master's. It's more like, okay, I'm willing to hear you out, and if I can trust that you won't lead me astray, if I can trust that you will guide me and our kids on a great path, I'm willing to get on your page. I'm willing to get on your programming.
I see. Now, and I'm going to ask more specifically about that, what I call this like worship of masculinity and the denigration of femininity. Um, well, let me just ask that now. Why? Because we talked about the fear-based mindset, the not seeing good examples of certain relationships, or male leadership, for example, and then for leading certain generations to tell their daughters, make sure you don't. It's because it's one thing to say get your education. It's another thing to say get your education so you don't depend on the man, right? It's
Yeah.
quite so. But then there's this other thing out there. Let's call it like the political arm, the social arm, the intellectual arm of this whole scenario has to do with, well, men are hiding happiness in cubicles, and they're hiding happiness in work, and they're hiding happiness in the taxes, and that's where all the happiness is. They've been keeping all that happiness away from you. They want to keep you stored away, hidden
In the
in the
kitchen.
home where in the kitchen where you're going to be unhappy and all that family stuff. You're pregnant, you're bare feet, so on and so forth. It's kind of interesting how they say barefoot and pregnant. Well, what's the opposite? Well, in a ditch, digging a hole, and sweaty and dirty. Is that the like? Anyways,
Yeah.
so what in your mind? What comes to mind when? Because I'm sure you hear from women in your channel, right? And you're also perhaps privy to the literature, either in academia or let's say the media organs that propagate such things. what exactly is it about this obsession with masculine ends, masculine activities that's the be all end all, and anything feminine is a social construct that's meant to keep you in chains?
I think it comes from, we talked about freedom earlier. I think it comes from the whole idea that freedom, if you're making your own money, if you're going out, if you're working, it gives us false illusion that you're free to make your own decisions. But I mean, anybody who works in a 9 to 5 know how not free we are in the working. So I think that's where it stemmed from. We were craving freedom that much, so we associated going out and working and those masculine skills with freedom, and we associated being in the kitchen, taking care of the home, taking care of the kids as captivity. And I think honestly, that's where it stemmed from.
So, how could it then possibly be that when you have a whole bunch of women now out there in a few generations? Now, okay, let me be fair. This is a fairly recent in terms of human evolution, if you will. So, for the longest period, we've been doing things one way, and then it's like 2 seconds ago we started doing this thing. So it really has the time to play out hasn't really occurred yet. But are you hopeful? Because there's that whole thing about, I'm going back slightly to that question about, is it too late and so on and so forth. Are you hopeful that, okay, now that people are out there seeing that, well, really there isn't any freedom and out there going out there to conquer the world per se, it's just work. And are you hopeful that there will be a realization, okay? Or is it just going to be more of a digging of the heels, a sour grapes kind of, you know the alternative.
Yeah. I think there's going to be more digging of the heels. There's a sense of pride. We don't want to, women in general on a whole don't want to say, oh, wait, we messed up, we lied. Oh, sorry, can you take us back, please? We don't want to wave the white flag. So I think it's going to be more of us pushing and fighting. And then the more we fail at it, it's the more we're going to blame men for the inequality in system. But as I said, it's just going to take a few women to take a step back and really be honest with yourself. It took me being honest with myself, because I mean, I'm not going to sit here and act as though I was just this perfect. And I say all the time, if any of my exes in the chat right now, I'm not, I was that person who I'm strong, independent. I don't need a man for anything. I got this. I'm on my own. But it took me getting to rock bottom, you might say, hitting a rough place in life and saying, yeah, this isn't it. And I don't want to spend the rest of my life having to fight like this. I have to take a step back and be humble myself and say, hey, I made a mistake. Men in general, can you help me figure out what you guys want? And that's where I am. That's how I am where I am now.
You mentioned believing in God. Dr. Thunder has something to say here. Before I read his super chat, there is because what he's talking about here and spirituality in general, one could also say traditionalism, but also there is a class element. Let's say we took one parameter such as divorce rates and so on and so forth. We know that there's a big difference between divorces, upper classes versus lower classes. Do you think that the class aspect is key here? Did you have a traditional upbringing? Now I know you said who raised you and so on and so forth, but I want you to characterize it. Would you say it's traditional? And if you don't mind, like, what role do you think socioeconomic class has to play before we go to spirituality that Dr. Thunder is mentioning there?
I wouldn't say it was more of a traditional, only because the woman in my family had to go out, and that's because we were more lower to middle class. So we had to go out and work. So I do think socioeconomic status play a part in us choosing. And then because a lot of the women in my family had to go out to work as equally as the men, if not more than the men, this whole idea of submitting and obeying, paired with the media and propaganda and all those things, that took us away from this whole submission and cooperating and obeying our men. So I do, to be fair, I do think socioeconomic status played a part.
I see. So, which hinges upon that whole high value man thing, and also if you come from the stock of high value men taking care of everything, and the women were not out there getting their hands dirty, then there would be not that reluctance to, number one, see men in a certain light, and then number two, acquiesce to a man's needs, desires, or position, if you will.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so Dr. Thunder, thank you very much for the $5 super chat. You say, Chantel, hello, what role has spirituality played in your red pill awakening? Other than the law of attraction. So you mentioned believing in God and so on and so forth. Is there a link spiritually to in your personal view to what you're saying?
In my personal red pill awakening, I would say there's a link, but only because, as I said, in learning about the law of attraction and in learning that I control what I attract in my life, that's when I started doing my research and trying to figure out why I was attracting undesirable dating patterns. But I did grow up in the church, and I mean, I know I don't like to bring religion in things. My experience from being in the church is slightly different from any other person's experience. My experience was very straight and narrow, for lack of better words, and to not question anything. So I was heavily in the church, and this fight between me wanting to be catering to my husband, but then wanting to because even my church was advising me to go out and not depend on man, go to school. It wasn't pushing the focus on, like, my church was, I was not allowed to even look at a man, look at the opposite gender in my church. So, that fight, so it did contribute to me being a modern woman, not caring about men's perspective. So spirituality, in the sense where learning about the law of attraction and learning these things, that's how I stumbled on red pill content. So yes, it did play a part.
I see. You investigating these things, you looking within, and then also you stumble upon the content out there externally. Okay, so let me go back to a question I asked you about what you want your man to admire. Okay, it is important. No, look, there's a spectrum of women, just like there's a spectrum of anything. You could say there's a bell curve, for example, right? And some are more driven than others. Okay, where would you put yourself in that regard when it comes? I'm talking about being driven in terms of like career and so on and so forth. And that's just part of nature, right? There's a natural distribution and so on and so forth. Would you say that you're the more driven type? Perhaps you've already given some allusions to that part, but what would you say?
Well, when I was in corporate, yeah, I was very I want to get to the top. I wanted to succeed, and it's probably because I was raised in a third world country and I had family back home that I had to be successful for. But then I realized that the more I went and worked hard and proved myself at work, was the less fulfilled I felt. And I just couldn't figure out why I wasn't feeling fulfilled, even though I was successful in my corporate job. And it wasn't until being, I guess you would say, red pill aware, and realizing that nature was saying, hey, your role, your duty as a woman is to be a helpmate to a man. That's when I connected the dot and said, okay, that's why I wasn't feeling fulfilled. But in terms of when I was in corporate America, yes, I would say I was very driven, very ambitious to get to the top.
So is there still any part of your ego, your self-esteem, your view of yourself, your image of yourself that is tied to, let me not even ask that. I'm going to assume, because we're all human beings, I'm going to assume that there still is a part of yourself, that image, that esteem of yourself, that is at least looks back and admires yourself like, yeah, I did that, right? And for, if not just for you, but for women in general, is it a desire, I'm re-asking a question now, that men recognize your pursuits outside of the home? And what would that look like? What would your ideal situation where it's like this ideal man, yes, he's the leader, and so on and so forth. I will go with his program because he has demonstrated to me that he will not lead me astray and lead our family. All those things that you said, but still, he can see that I'm not whatever caricature of dumb, barefoot, and pregnant, right?
That's a good point. But so for me personally, there is still a sense of wanting to prove that, okay, look, I am disciplined. I can put my mind to something and I'll accomplish it. And that might be one of the reasons why I am obsessed with the gym. I prove that in the gym. I prove that. And I mean, I'm still in corporate America. I still have my businesses. I still have a couple LLCs, but I'm not leading with, hey, I'm not leading with that to show my discipline. I'm leading with the fact that I'm willing to stay in the gym 5 days out of the week so I can stay as fit as possible. I'm willing to not wear weaves and not wear eyelashes, so because that's what men want. So I'm showing my drive and my ambition, for lack of better words, through the things that I'm willing to do, so I can make my man, or make the kind of man that I want. The group, if we're going to use the word high value men, to say, hey, okay, she's disciplined because she can't stay in a size 4 dress even after 30.
So, is it common knowledge that amongst women, that men really highly value discipline in women? Because number one, I don't think it is, but I want to ask from a woman's perspective. I don't think that it is the case that women know this, because it just doesn't come along, and it's not part of the whole story. The Disney princess, one of the things, it wasn't, oh, she's very disciplined. That doesn't come up. But there are practical reasons why men like that. And for anyone listening, let me just kind of say it. Look, writ large, generally speaking, women are more emotional, and also they're more social. When you're more emotional and more social, it tends to be a little bit more of a chaos that goes on, right? Because there's kind of influences on things that perhaps are not objective. The social pressures tend to not be very objective, and then emotional pressures tend to, but men want women, okay? So you're like, if I'm going to have a woman, if I'm going to deal with a woman, in order to counterbalance the emotions and all that kind of stuff, it's very valuable that there is discipline. Or to put it the other way, to have an indisciplined, unruly, and emotional woman is like hell for a man, speaking as a man, right? And also, as a particular type of man, I'm a certain kind of guy. I'm an engineer type. Personality is INTJ, very structured in a certain way. I'm also an artist and other things, but generally speaking, I like things to be a certain way. So discipline in a woman is very key. I mean, it's something I don't know that many women know. But what would you say? Is this a typical thing? And how did you learn that? How did you know that demonstrating discipline is an important part of what a man wants?
So, I think women, I don't think we know, consciously we know, because I think the reason why we lead with our degree and our success is because we subconsciously want to prove our discipline, but we're just using the wrong channel to prove that discipline. So when we try to compete with men and say, hey, I'm successful too, hey, I have my degrees too, hey, I'm a PhD, we're indirectly kind of showing him that we're disciplined without knowing that it's kind of like nature. It's our instinct to show. But the disconnect is that men don't care necessarily about the PhD. What they care about is your discipline in the gym. It's your discipline to control your emotions. It's your discipline for your emotional intelligence. So to answer your question, I think subconsciously, like the universe, God is whispering in our ears and saying like, hey, men like discipline. But the other side of ourselves, the ego, is telling us, hey, show him your discipline by going back to school, when it's like, nah, that's not what he wants.
Let me go ahead before I skip this and forget. I believe Mr. Jesse Veal has a super chat here. Bam. Thank you very much, Jesse. And let's see here. I believe Jesse has a question, right? Chantel, how can traditional patriarchal men support women like yourself, who we consider allies, potential friends, and so on and so forth. In other words, what can men do in this particular project, or in your vision of the outcomes that you would like to see, the outcomes that perhaps you think are possible? What can a certain kind of men do to help?
I don't know. It's a good question because I mean, to help in terms of. I mean, I would say to kind of communicate more. Kevin and the Black Manosphere is doing a great job at like telling us, hey, this is what we don't want. This is what we want. And it took me because I mean, funny enough, I discovered Kevin way before that viral video. I've been watching Kevin since the pandemic hit. So when I was studying, I was learning as I was going, and I was shocked at some of the information. And like even the whole, he said masculine women back their car in. And I was like, what? I back my car in. Just like little things. Little things. Being someone who wasn't raised by a father, and then the father figures in my life weren't the aggressive one. They weren't the one to speak up. They were the ones who just like whatever goes, And then so I guess that's how you guys can help us to actually speak up more, to tell us what you like and to tell us what you don't like, because so many of us don't know what you like. And there are majority of women who will be like, oh, I don't care what you like, take me as I am. And that's why they still wear those lashes. But the few of us who are actually interested in learning, who want to genuinely learn from a man's perspective, is I can say to support us is to just speak up more, and don't care about the majority of women who's going to call you all kind of names and shame you, try to shame and insult you for voicing your preferences, but just focus on the few percentage who actually genuinely want to learn, because these few percentage are the only hope that we have in the Black community.
All right. You guys behave yourselves over there in the chat, because I don't tolerate nonsense in my chat room, okay? I'll say it and then I will not say it again. I don't tolerate nonsense in my chat room. So each and every one of you behave yourself. And that's all I will say for now. So, interesting thing here that you mentioned about, perhaps I'll reinterpret it as, okay, well, men need to kind of maybe insinuate and insert themselves back into the public square in terms of vocalizing, verbalizing, saying what exactly it is that they want, right? And therefore, it'll help because communication cannot be a bad thing, right? So now, that is a key point, and I hope Jesse Veal, if that answers your question, go ahead and say yes, give a 1, or send another $5 for a follow-up question. Okay, so now there is a thing about. Let me ask you this, and I believe because I was on your channel once before, and I believe that I brought up this point. So let me ask this now. Your ideal man relationship situation, right? Do you want to look up to him or not? Do you want to look up to your man or not?
Look up to him as if respect him?
Let's assume he is respectable.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Let's assume he is. In other words, your ideal man, paint him. Are you looking down or are you looking up?
No, definitely. Like, I want a man who, I mean, my situation is a very tricky situation. So I've mentioned before that I've lost a couple family members, and family members, parents figures. So people who I would depend on to lead in a situation. And then that's when I started really thinking, okay, really learning that as a woman, you were in your dad's house, and then you're supposed to get married and go in your husband's house. And that's why we have our dad's last name, and then we get married and get our husband's last name. So we're under our husband. So to have a husband that you can look up to, you can respect, and you can get on his programming and follow his lead is definitely something that I desire. Yes.
Now, how come? Because I've never asked a woman this question where they gave me an opposite answer. Okay? So what is the do I need to say any what is the issue then? Because it's like you on the one hand you want this cake, you want to eat your cake and have it, or you want this contradiction. You're like, I want to look up to my man, but nah, I don't need no man, and you can't tell me what to do. And well, you can't have both ways. Now, let me add a little bit of a little bit of help to coming from the point of view of some kind of an artistic type of person. In relationships, you're literally playing roles. Okay, like we are not born. In other words, I'm not saying that we're born blank slates. Okay, right? We're definitely we're human beings. Okay, but you could be born into different cultures, different traditions, also different roles, different ways of being in different times and different eras where different things were going on, different ecological, economical, technological landscapes. And in relationships, you're actually playing a role. Let's say the role of it's actually called roles, right? So there is an aspect of role playing that is needed. And if you're not playing the role of someone looking up, then you're not going to get it in a certain sense. But anyways, you get my question as to, well, what is this seeming contradiction whereby I ask every woman and they say, I want to look up to my man. But then, on the other hand, you can imagine all the other things that they say that are completely opposite to ever looking up. What is that?
Again, I think it is one fear, and then it's also not having that example in the household. Many of us were raised by single parents, and more than likely that parent was a mom. So we have this idea like, oh yeah, I want a man who is going to lead. I want a man who I can respect and I can look up to. But we've never been in situations where we had to take a step back and allow a man to lead because we didn't have that father in the household, or we had to look up to, especially a black man. So we love to say it. We love to say our wishes and say our desires, but if we've never experienced it and put it and practice it, then our actions contradict our desires.
I see. So so it's just it goes back to that whole thing of you need to see it, otherwise it won't happen. And then if you can't see it around because everyone else has inculcated some other vision, then how could it possibly happen, right? So this is a pessimistic viewpoint, but in the apps, okay, so I guess that's why it's quite important, as you mentioned, for men to re-insinuate themselves into the landscape and say certain things, if you will, right? Especially certain kinds of men that women may say that they want, right? To say exactly what it is they want, and then see what happens, right? Is that more or less it, or is that still not hopeful and no matter it's already too late?
No, I think that is it for men to step up and say, hey, this is what I want. But then on the flip side of that is for women to start entering these relationships in good faith and to not always think the worst case scenario. So a part of never witnessing a man that we can look up to, that's us just saying, okay, can I look up to him? Can I look up to him? And we have all these barriers, we have all these guards up, and we enter these relationships with our guards up. But if we enter these relationships and say, okay, this man is a possibility that I can look up to him, let me picture him in good light. Not saying ignore his red flags, and not saying to just look up to anybody, but enter a relationship in good faith and trusting, working on our vetting skills and trusting, hey, I have never experienced this before. This is new to me. And communicate with the guy and let him know. But I mean, I don't think there is any hope lost. But it's just us as women. We have to be very intentional. We have to be very intentional with when dating and knowing that we want to change this course.
I see. So, shout out to Clarence. Clarence in the house says we need to support cooperative women by marrying them and raising healthy families. We also need to popularize cooperative women in social media. Okay, but I can't disagree with that. I cannot disagree with that. Now, when it comes to cooperation, or let me use the word that people don't like, submission, right? That word. What exactly do people envision seeing? And by people, I mean like women. What exactly do they envision? What exactly do they see? Is it the precious movie that, oh, if you cooperate or submit, you're gonna end up being beaten, and is there an epidemic of just rampant violence, people kicking ass and so on and so forth, or is it just what one might, the non-generous interpretation will just be, well, we all know why people don't want to cooperate. It's because you're just being a baby or something like that, and you don't want to, and it's me, 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 so on and so forth. Um, what is it? We mentioned fear, right? And but in the meantime, right, we mentioned looking up, right, to that guy. Do you assume you're not going to be cooperating with someone you look up to, or are you going to be like questioning every? Because then you're not going to be looking up to him anymore, and then you're going to start looking down on him, and then it's going to be his fault, right? So what? Why this thing? Is it really all just go back to fear again at the end of the day?
You know what I think it is? Drama sells at the end of the day. All right. So we have these movies, like, every movie you can think of, it gives you some kind of drama filled, even if it's relationship based, it's like, oh, he was beating her, he manipulated her, he did this, he did it. Because at the end of the day, drama sells. But if we walk around, if what we see, what we put in our subconscious mind becomes our reality. And though so many of us have never witnessed an abusive relationship, so many of us have never been abused in our life, because we watch all these movies and these TV shows and we read upon all these stories, we internalize these talking points and these topics and believe that it's really happening in the real world. So that's why a lot of us, even though many of us have never experienced, does not even know a high value man, but we have that mindset where, well, if he makes a certain amount of money, he's manipulative and he's going to cheat on you and he's going to beat you, and nobody in their personal life has never even met a high value man. So how do you know this? Are you going based on what the movie told you, or are you going based on something you witnessed in your personal life? And that's very detrimental to Black community. We're unable to, and as women, you mentioned before, we are emotional creatures. So when a man can watch a movie and know that, okay, it's just a movie. When a woman watch a movie, she gets caught up in the movie. She gets caught up in the storyline and creates a whole entire family based off the characters in the movie because of her emotions.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. There is a notion also that I will cooperate with the right man. I will be feminine to the right man. I will, let's smile, right, at the right time. Now, here's something that I think we know, but we need to point out, right? You will not, and Kevin says this, okay? But the thing is, that elusive animal out there, that high value man that everyone is looking for, he will stay 10,000 miles away from you the minute he notices any crap. In other words, you could be in the grocery line, right? And you don't act a certain way. You're never gonna find that right. You're not even, you're gonna be like, where is this guy? I'm looking for this guy to cooperate with. You will not see him. He will not be anywhere near you. You will not know he actually exists because because of the behaviors you're exhibiting outside the context of a relationship. So, what do you have to say with regards to waiting? Well, number one or two. Well, let me just say the one thing, which is I don't think it's possible. Number one, people's personalities and behaviors and so on and so forth is not a switch where you just turn it on, turn it off, right? It's kind of crazy, right? And then number two, what do you have to say, to women about the fact that these particular guys are not stupid and they're gonna stay 10,000 miles away from you, quite literally, and you will never even know they exist. You will never see them if you're not acting right.
And okay, so and as I said, I use my channel to encourage us to think things through logically. Okay, at the initial interaction between men and women expect men to come with their masculine energy, to approach you, to pursue you, to ask for your number, to ask you out, to buy you a drink, to do all these things. So why then wouldn't we approach a situation initially with our feminine energy. We have to really think about things logically when we talk about relationships and dating. And then not only that, this whole idea that, okay, I'll become submissive to the right man. But if you have never met the right man, how do you even know how to be submissive? So my pushback on that argument is, do you even know what submission look like? Because say you're 20, I'm 29. So say a 29-year-old is saying, hey, I'll be submissive when I meet the right man. I've never yet met a man worthy of my submission. So do you think that when you meet this high value man or this right man, then it's going to be a switch that automatically turns on and all your practicing and your habits of being combative is going to just go out the window and you're going to adopt all these submissive traits? Like, no. So we really have to start thinking things through and thinking that this narrative that we're saying, again, social media, the movies, TV shows, magazines, every single woman has been saying the same thing, beating the drum of the same thing, and no one is saying, hey, sis, this makes no sense. And we have these level up channels who are telling us, hey, do this, do that, putting a band-aid on the problem so we can attract the man, but nobody's teaching us how to keep him. And then that's a disconnect.
So what does this submission and cooperation look like? Because you mentioned that, how do you know what it is? How do you know how you should act? There is a vision of it. Let's say on the one hand, you have women who envision this horrible, oppressive situation. That's what submission looks like to them. And then you have women who may see, okay, well, I'll get on his program, but I'm waiting for the right kind of man. In other words, they're still looking at it as negative. That's why they won't just. But in reality, what have you come to learn about the nature of what it looks like in reality? Okay. And what is it? What can you tell women out there, either to help assuage their fears or to help them, kind of inculcate this particular perspective in their lives?
Honestly, it's just letting your guards down. Not in a way where you're ignoring his red flags and he's just a guy with 16 baby mamas and you're just like, well, I'm gonna let my guards down around him. No, of course not. But it's that whole, oh, I'm gonna ask him a bunch of questions and I'm not gonna tell him anything about me and ask him about me and try to catch him in a lie and all these things. It's honestly letting your guards down and trusting in whatever God you believe in. Trusting that God or whatever will put the instinct in you, will put some kind of gut feeling, some kind of woman intuition in you to ask the right questions, to learn, to vet properly, and to know that, okay, if my goal is to be with a man and to be on a man's page, then I can't go in there with the mindset that, okay, well, he has to prove to me first and I not do anything to him or anything like that. It's like, it's honestly enter a relationship in good faith.
Good faith. Now, Snuggles has a question down there about power. And you mentioned freedom earlier. And even though when you get this freedom and you go and do certain things because you thought that the power was really in the cubicle and in your paycheck, even though you know that it's rough and tumble out there, corporate America is just another version of a ditch or something like that. But you will then dig your heels in, because people, when they make a decision, there is that whole bias of the sunk cost bias. Like, you already did it, so now you got to justify it, you got to rationalize it. It was the right decision. I was right. Yeah, I'm not wrong. Blah blah blah. That kind of stuff. So, and then there is this whole aspect of power, which is mentioned. What do you think about Snuggles' questions? Right? Or did I even put? Oh yeah, willing to give up their power. Willing to give up their power. Do you actually think they have power, or are they in a position of power, or more in a position of it's like a siege, a barricade, where you're holding up the gates and the walls, and you're like, we're not going to give up, but that's not really a position of power. What do you have to say to that?
I think that we are definitely not in a position of power. I think that women fighting for equality with men is actually putting us back. Because at the end of the day, and I know this is a controversial topic, but at the end of the day, we need men more than they need us. For one simple reason: once a month, our emotions are all over the place. And then if we decide to get pregnant for 9 months out of that year, we can't fend for ourselves, when men never have to deal with those situations. This every day of the month, men are okay. They're not bleeding from the inside out. So we do need men. We need men more than men need us. So to fight for equality and to say, oh, we're equal and we're of equal importance, yes, but it seems as though women are just trying to be over men. We're trying to be more than men, and unless we can realize that there's power in femininity and there's just power in getting on a man's page. It's kind of like the analogy that Game Changer likes to use is the pushing the car. I mean, I would much rather steer the car than push it. Like if it comes down to it, but women are out here fighting to push the car with men, and we need to understand that men want to push the car, so allow them to push the car. Just steer the car and make sure that we're okay. But yeah, once we can realize that there's power in submission, and once we can realize that nature has called us to be men's helpmate, and it doesn't mean that we're less than men. It just means that we can help them get to their goals. And if you vet properly and you're with the right man, an ambitious man, then you are going to get to your goals together.
Shout out to Red Sings the Blues. Can you read what Red Sings the Blues says, Chantel?
Donation to both of you. Very beautiful, Chantel. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you to Red Sings the Blues, and thank you to Chantel for sharing your experience with us and coming on this channel to, very, very much appreciated. And Snuggles asked a question here, and let me just go ahead and say this, ask you. There is this whole trope of a certain kind of guy, right? Mm-hmm. On the one hand, you have the high value man, and then on the other hand, you have this kind of raw sexual attraction, which tends to be perhaps maybe the man isn't really worth crap, okay? And perhaps you actually are attracted to him because he's not really worth crap and he's a barbarian. And I kind of get it. Yeah, man, barbarian. Yeah, let's just go. Yeah, that kind of stuff, right? Tyrone, if you will, as they call him around these parts. Okay, Snuggles is asking a question, right? Which I think I just answered, and I think it's kind of obvious. Like, why women are attracted to those types of guys. Like, okay, there's this guy that has 69 baby mamas or something like that. And it's like, I think it's kind of obvious, and I think there's nothing really wrong with it, but we all have to be smart. Like, in other words, you have, to put it in religious terms, there are temptations that you are prone to, okay? But it doesn't mean that you should go there. Or maybe you can sneak and take a taste one time in Cancun or something, and whatever it may be. But but anyways, can you answer the question?
I mean, I think it's honestly like the hype of it. As you said, like the temptation, the like, oh, look, Tyrone, ooh, he looks, but it comes down to temporary satisfaction or temporary pleasure over long-term satisfaction. Like, what's best for you in the long term, the long run. So yeah, though Tyrone might be nice with his six packs, and Tyrone might be 6'4", who knows? But it's like, is Tyrone beneficial for you over the guy who actually is driven on his purpose and wants to have a family and wants to be married before he starts his family? But a lot of times, unfortunately, as women, we find that those men boring. So we tend to go after the good for the highlight for now and neglect the long-term benefits.
I see. Now, so let me get the super chat before got Dr. Thunder in the house, the man with the very immaculate tech center, power station, 5D camera, many monitors and keyboards and all kinds of stuff. You need to do some consultation for us there. But there is a question here, but in your opinion, right? And shout out to Miseducation of an African in America. So thank you very much. Let me give you the round of applause for the $5 super chat. In your opinion, what is the stronger driver of educational pursuits in women? Adding value to a marriage or long-term relationship, or ego stroking amongst other women or such and such? And you had already given an answer before, which is it's to avoid having to need a man. But what would you say in response?
Yeah, I would say it's the ego stroke. And again, let me say, I'm speaking about personal experience. I'm not speaking for every woman, but I would say it's the ego stroke, because then if you think about it, adding value to marriage or long term, then why would you need an education for that? And then even if you need an education, it would more be towards the wife's school, the or if your husband owns a business, it will be more catered towards, okay, what's his business? How can I help you? How can I go back to school to further my education to impact your business? But so many of us are going to school as women. We're going to school for liberal arts, and I'll throw myself under the bus. I went to school for sociology. It's like, okay, but so I think it's definitely the ego stroke, and it's definitely so we can throw our caps in the gown and we can put on the cape and say hooded. My hashtag was hooded when I got my master's degree, and it was just for the hype. It was just for the ego stroking.
Good answer. Good answer. So, Dr. Thunder, what you got for us, sir?
Hey, can you put Red Sings the Blues, put his comment back up there?
His comment back up there. He had one over here. Boom. Okay.
I just want to say, Red, stop simping.
Yep.
No, I'm tripping, Red. I'm tripping.
Red out here simping. It's a symposium. Anyways, go ahead.
So this is. I feel like I'm at home right now because you're two folks that been on my show, and one thing I was thinking about during the conversation, it seems that so I like this point that you were making about, so discipline is important if it's men or women, and it seems that that discipline is sort of maybe aimed in the wrong direction sometimes with women. And yeah, because obviously being able to do things like go to the gym consistently, as you were talking about, having discipline to recognize maybe when you're being emotional and not necessarily being particularly rational. And so obviously those are two great examples of how discipline would be beneficial and positive. Another way it seems that you have used discipline, Chantel, in particular, is the activity on your YouTube channel, which is very consistent. It's a lot of content, and it's coming at you, and it seems like you're using your training, your education, that obviously is having an impact. So yeah, so career for women is tricky because it's all a matter of timing, right? So men can work until we die, right? And we don't have to take off to work. I mean, to have a family, to have kids. As a matter of fact, we're expected to continue to work to support the family. But obviously, women at some point would have to take time off if they're going to be good parents. And even if it's just for maternity leave, they would have to take some time off. Now, I think there's what Ike was talking about as far as his mom and going back to school when she was in her 40s. That does seem like a good solution to that common issue, but it would require the sort of prioritization on, finding a man. So I just
and perhaps a certain kind of man too.
Right.
Well, I mean, the best you can get in terms of that provision aspect of things, right?
Right.
Because otherwise it may be difficult, so on and so forth. So, in your prime years, catch this. And she got herself a high value man, if I were to use that trope again. Yeah. So yeah, she did well in that regard, and then she was able to then go get the law degree afterwards. But she already did have a nursing so on and so forth. So she was able to
Right.
generally take things easy, and she had 6 kids too, of which I'm the last.
Yeah, I think the
So
issue here is that I don't think that men are against women getting degrees. That's not that isn't
no,
the
of
that
course
isn't
not.
the issue. The issue is this sort of hyper priority on the degrees and the using the degree to assert some sort of dominance. That's the issue because it seems like women from other cultures, they don't seem to have a problem with getting their degree, but then also getting their MRS. If you understand what I mean.
Hmm. So let me ask. Oh, I don't know. Was it you have any reactions to anything that have been said so far?
Oh no, no,
Chantal?
I agree. I think honestly, there's nothing wrong with getting your degree, and I think a lot of women misunderstand that concept when men say, we don't care as much about your degree as you think. They think men want us to be dumb and uneducated and just ambitionless. But that's not necessarily the case. It's just the emphasis we put on our degree. It's the value we put on our degree to think that, oh look, I have my degree now. I'm better than you, or I'm equal to you, or you should choose me because I'm smart.
Yeah, and here's the thing too, because men are quite pragmatic, and I kind of harp on that point again as to the whole thing about equality and so on and so forth. Because to have a value structure of some kind, there has to be an end that you're pursuing. So perhaps if you're a woman that doesn't want a family or structure, there is perhaps no real reason why you should understand that a man should be the leader. Or if you don't want to live in a certain kind of society, there is no reason for you to think that a man should be a leader. However, when there is a goal, something pragmatic, then you pick the person who is less emotional. That's the kind of like there's bookshelves filled with books that you can use to make the argument I just made. But at the end of the day, it really is when there is a goal to be pursued. Therefore, there immediately becomes a hierarchy. In other words, whom is better, what ways and means and methods are better at getting there, right? Speaking from a pragmatic point of view now, not necessarily from a spiritual point of view or even perhaps deeply philosophical point of view, just purely pragmatic. Like if you're going to pursue an end, well, who should lead? Whom is better in terms of the pragmatism, right? So I wanted to ask you this. Let's go back to Tyrone for a second, okay? Because there is something about exposure to certain kinds of Tyrone, or having one Tyrone in your head of the idea, and because not as a result, not being exposed to other kinds of even higher level Tyrones, right? Because number one, they keep you away, as I mentioned before, right? They keep certain women away, and also because your aesthetic of them from the outside, you look at that and you're like, and I hate this word, but it's quite common in the African American community. They use the word corny, and not even knowing anything about the person, right? But
Yeah.
it is my experience because look, if I may say so of myself, okay, like I know of certain kinds of men, okay, whom are levels beyond Tyrone in the Tyrone side of things, plus many, many other aspects of things that Tyrone can even come near, right? But that a lot of women will just never experience and don't even know it exists because they're looking for a particular kind of aesthetic. Now, do you just think that it is because, and there's a socio-political, a socio-economic, let's say, aspect to this too, because there's a class thing going on that makes you think that, so do you just think it's a question of exposure, that they're not exposed to different kinds of men, that they don't know that they're actually men who are more interesting and have all that Tyrone stuff still going on too, plus, 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 plus. That's why they're not A, acting right, B, trying to find those guys, or and so on and so forth?
I think so, and I think it's also who we associate that alpha characteristics with. A lot of times women tend to associate the drug dealers or the head of the gang person as the alpha male, as the one that they look up to. And as women, we're hypergamous. We want the alpha male. We want the top guy. So it's a lack of exposure because we don't know that, hey, the opposite of Tyrone can also be an alpha male. He can also be on top of his games. He can also lead. We don't know that. So then we go for the Tyrone with the 69 baby mamas instead of the guy who wants to start a family and lead in his family.
The number of baby mamas keeps increasing. think it was 16, now it's 69. This Tyrone is busy.
Tyrone is busy. Now, related to that thing that I mentioned right now, which is about the pragmatic aspects. Again, if you're going to embark upon an enterprise, there are practical reasons. You mentioned before, men are okay all through the month, right? That's one practical, pragmatic kind of reason. The other practical, pragmatic reason is, emotional plus social influence, right? The one who's going to be more emotional, more socially influenced, perhaps is better for making the house a home. Perhaps it's better for the experiential side of things, right? Which is needed. But perhaps the one who is more practical should be responsible for building the house, right? And all those external things. So speaking of external things, one thinks of the lower rung of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, protection and provision. In the West, protection and provision has been outsourced to men outside the house. So protection and provision is generally not still happening by with women still need men, the firefighters, the loggers, the ditch diggers, the cop, the soldiers. But you don't need to be nice to those guys or have a relationship with them or so on and so forth, or be a certain kind of woman such that the men in the society will view you that way and protect you. So if women indeed do not quote unquote need, and I mean need in a real way, not need emotionally, men, since they can outsource it to the organs of the government and so on and so forth, what are therefore the incentives? Why should they change? Or is it just more like, well, I have the need for this person emotionally?
So I say this all the time. And actually, when I started my channel, I started it on this notion of we got to think 40, 50 years from now when we need an emergency contact, when we need someone to help us down the stairs because we can't. It's not just a whole, oh, I don't need a man because I can call Uber, or I don't need a man because, the drive-by mechanic is right there. It's more than that. It's bigger than that. We need community, especially in the older we get. And it touches home to me because I mentioned that my mom died of stage 4 cancer 2 years ago. And in witnessing me and my sister there alone as family, and not having that community that we need as people when we get older, when we get sick. So these women walking around thinking, oh, I don't need a man, I can do this on my own, I'm independent. No, you can say that now, but how are you going to feel in 40 years when you don't have an emergency contact, when you have to put 911 as your emergency contact? Like, it's a serious conversation that we need to start having.
So it really just comes down to the practical needs at the end of life type thing.
I mean, throughout. Yeah, and throughout life, we can't just always, because okay, so I was in Texas when the snowstorm hit unexpectedly. Texas does not get snow, and then the snowstorm hit. Everything was shut down. The fire department, like police officer and those things. But for the emergencies, who are you gonna call? Like it's just little things in life, like little emergencies in life.
I see. So shout out to Eisen Sama in the house. Dr. Thunder, you got a sound effect for us of some kind to
I sure do.
Dom DeMarco himself says, Eisen Sama in the house. And by the way, he has a channel as well. Go ahead and check it out. He has great streams on Sunday where they keep it real over there. Late. Oh, nice. Late to the stream. But salute to Ike, Dr. Thunder, and Chantel. Donation for the content, brother. And I believe there was one by Snuggles. You probably already saw Snuggles' comment, Chantel. She is...
Thank you.
Donating to your... Yeah. Much appreciated. And we have another guest right here in the back chat. And let's go ahead and what do you have for us?
First of all, hey, how you guys doing today? Shout out to you guys. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, Shozan, we can hear you just fine. Maybe you might need to speak up a little bit, but go ahead. What you got for us?
My only question to the guest is this: to the lady guest, shout out to you. Do you not find it a bit well, I guess you wouldn't, because from our experience. I'll just say it like this: as a man who would consider himself somewhat in the category of the educated black male area, I got to say it's a little bit dreary. It's a little bit bad news to realize that women are so in love with Tyrone that not only do they not see us, but the only thing that could even sway, since we're kind of hitting more on our community more than just others in general, focus on our community. Not only do women prefer Tyrone that they don't see us, but the only thing that would even sway black women to look at us is, well, we might need a repairman when we're 50 or when we're old or everything. So I know that people talk about, is love real, the whole romance thing, is it chemicals or is it not? But the bottom line is, it's kind of sad to realize that Tyrone is going to get all those actual desiring emotions, and that the educated black male is just supposed to sign the bill and make sure to carry you places. You know what I'm saying? I find that a bit disheartening. But throw it back to you guys.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think I would blame Disney. I blame Disney a lot. I would blame Disney for that fairy tale illusion that they gave us to say like, oh, a man is supposed to be everything physically, and he's supposed to make you feel this kind of way and all these butterflies, and if your heartbeats aren't in sync, then he's not the one. And women get caught up on the Tyrones, and we feel those butterflies for the Tyrones. And as you say, it's not until we're in the situation where we're approaching the wall and we're like, oh my gosh, I need a opposite of Tyrone. That's when we start actually going for these educated men who are on their purpose and on their grind. It's unfortunate, but the more we have this conversation and the more we highlight these behaviors and highlight how detrimental they are, women acting this way, then we'll start seeing better.
Alpha
Yeah,
F's and beta B's, anyways.
Yeah, I frequently got clowned. I frequently got clowned when I was growing up, because I talked too proper, and that was always the thing. And there has been, especially over the last decade or so, there's been this if you don't have swag, then most black women can't see you. It's like you're totally and completely invisible to them.
Exactly.
If you don't have swag. And swag is, unfortunately, swag is like this thing where really the way that you get swag is basically from having approached and been with a lot of women. Frankly, that's just being, keeping it 100. That's the way that you get swag. The more comfortable you are with women, a lot of it is going to have something to do with how much experience you've had. And so, it's that old sort of, what is it? Pre-selection, it's like pre-selection gone amok. So it seems that the lizard brain and women's lizard brain, they've sort of learned how to pick up that swag equals more experience with women. And then therefore, if other women want this person, I want him too. It seems that on a sort of molecular level, that's what's happening.
And it's that whole thing. If other women want him, I want him too. Men experience this, that as soon as they get in a relationship, then they get the hey big head text message. As soon as they post their significant other on social media, that's when their DM is like flooded. Women have this notion like, oh wait, it's a competition in our heads. Like, hey, she has him, I want to compete and show him that, hey, I'm better than her. And then if in the event he was supposed to leave her for the other girl, then the other girl is like, okay, I don't want him. It's messed up. It's messed up. It really is. And it's going to take a level of maturity for us to actually can admit that, hey, these behaviors aren't okay. We need to do better.
So, Shozan, did you? I think I cut you off at some point. Shozan, did you have anything to say? Have we satisfactorily addressed you being in a depressed mood out there, being the educated black man, and seeing Tyrone getting all the loving, and you're over there crying in your pillow?
Well, let me set this straight then. First of all, I got plenty of snow bunnies, but the reason I wanted to come up is to handle this. But the reason all right, so let's get into it. Let's get straight into it then. So let's get straight into it then. Why should black men be having this conversation when we have access to the snow bunnies then? Since we're bringing up snow bunnies, why should we be trying to convince black women to like what they primarily don't like since we're swimming in snow bunnies like I am?
Well,
I
that is. Go ahead, Chantel.
okay. I don't think black men should convince black women anything at this point. In witnessing what I've been witnessing from making my videos and just sharing my perspective on platforms. I don't think I think at this point black men just go for who goes for you and go for who is willing to get on your programming. But to put the energy and the time into trying to convince someone to go in a direction that's going to benefit them and their community is just, it's not. Just go for a woman who you don't have to convince, but who are already willing to learn.
Okay, so Shozan, I want to ask you this because this is something that I've touched on before, which is the whole thing about the economic or class aspect of this. Because the thing is that whole swag thing, okay, and it also goes to that thing about I don't understand. There's a limited experience, okay, because a lot of this, a lot of the typical swag Tyrone types are very boring. In other words, when it comes to the my breadth of experience in terms of actual interesting men, the most interesting men in the world types. Okay, there are no Tyrones there. You know what I mean? And these women will never get to experience those types of men because they do exist and they're in a different strata. They're just different, right? So, Shozan, what is, and also Chantel, in light of everything else that has been said, you also, if you could respond as well, because I'm going to restate a question. What is the socioeconomic aspect of this? Because it seems to be the case that there are other cultures that don't, let's say, for example, according to D, do that, look down at that bottom rung, that understand that there are different dimensions to this particular alpha male that they're looking for, rather than paying attention to two particular parameters, which then equal to, well, has he had a whole bunch of tail or something similar to that? You there,
That's a
Shozan? You
very
have
good
anything to add
point.
to that? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that's a very good point. And I will put it like this. I can't put it any better than other YouTubers have put it. Women in other cultures might still have their fun with whatever their particular rough, rowdy boy of their community is, but they're also still taught to be like mothers and wives and to treasure those type of things back in the day. I'll just say it like this. I've grown up, obviously, as you could tell, in the neighborhood, which has a mixture of people, but predominantly Italian white folks. And what I'll say is this, yeah, at least I'll speak from my experience. A lot of white girls might go ahead and get with the Tyrones or even the bad white boy types, whatever the name is, the Brads or whatever, but they're not going to go ahead and post memes on their Instagram about how most men ain't nothing. And if you're educated, then you're lame. White girls will at least keep their particular love of those caveman characteristics more hidden, whereas black women will go out of their way to go demonize and knock down any man that, quote, sounds white or is reading his books or building himself. You know what I mean? There's a
I
certain amount
see.
of
So
hiddenness that
you're the
public doesn't see.
Tyrone. You're the Tyrone of that neighborhood. I see. Oh, okay. You're out there taking, the snow bunny slayer, Italian bunny slayer of the. I'm just
Of South Jersey, yeah, of South Jersey, you know what I'm saying? So
South. um. So Chantel, what do you have to say about that? What he
Yeah,
just said
I agree
regarding,
with
yeah.
what you say. And then to even add, I went to a predominantly white college. And I mean, a lot of those white girls in those fraternity and those fraternity parties, they weren't choosing the nerds. They were going to the frat parties and they were turning up at these frat parties. But at the end of the day, they knew, okay, after graduation, I'm going to settle down and I'm going to focus. So that in the last senior year, it's when you see that they couple up. The senior year is when they actually start going to the engineering buildings and going to, the chemistry and all these different buildings to meet their husband, and they kind of ease back on those frat parties. While black women, senior year is when we started actually flying out. We started going to Atlanta for our spring break instead of going to the engineering building. So I think other cultures, though they still went to their Tyrone in their years, they still had in the back of their mind, hey, this Tyrone is just temporary. I'm going to have to get it together if I want a family and marriage. While we just did not put a time stamp on Tyrone. If Tyrone was just, we didn't think twice about it.
Shout out again to the Miseducation of an African in America for another $2. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. Now, it is quite apropos to what we just mentioned, and perhaps you might need to reiterate. But in light of the particular phrase "educated lame," right? What do you have to say? What any thoughts, Chantel?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing that we're talking about. I mean, we because it's not praised as much in the media. These movies don't highlight the great characteristics of an educated lame. It's all the Tyrones. It's all the you know, in the movies. And as I said earlier, that's what we got to reference. These movies, these magazines, these social media, and all of those portray the Tyrones as, oh yeah, he's a great guy. He's the guy who's going to have butterfly in your system. But that the educated lame guy is like, it's not. He's the boring friend that you friend zone. So I think that's where we got that from.
It's I think an interesting thing. Oh, I'm sorry. I think an interesting thing about this is I think we also should not sort of glorify the so-called educated lame either, because there are things that someone that is lame can do, and to sort of level up in stuff like going to the gym, um, trying to get their confidence up by actually approaching women that they find attractive, getting involved with stuff like sports and getting hobbies, maybe join a bowling league. There's all kinds of things that so-called educated lames can do to maybe lose some of that lame.
Let me ask you this, Dr. Thunder. Um, the phrase "educated lame" seems to suggest, and perhaps it's not explicitly stated, that there's a link between those two things, which obviously there isn't. No one talks about the uneducated lame, which there are dozens of those out there, right? Probably, you have a pool of lames, same pool, some are educated, some are not, right? So what's this whole educated lame crap? Again, is that kind of low level socioeconomic race to the bottom kind of thinking? Is that what's going on here?
Yeah. Yeah, those words are put together on purpose. It's a way to try to, uh, being educated is not necessarily lame, and being lame, a prerequisite to that is not education, right? So the stuff, it doesn't really fit together, but it's a phrase that gets packaged together. It seems to it's like a what is it? It's an oxymoron or something. The stuff doesn't even go together, right? Because you could be, I mean, because I think Tyrone is lame, right? In a matter of speaking. So yeah,
But I see your point. So
yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was going to
I
ask
did want
Chantel
to.
to comment on. Okay, well, let me ask Chantel to
You,
comment on this.
your show, man.
Um, in terms of what the men should be doing, and I'm going to use this particular nexus point here to expand upon that. Dr. Thunder just mentioned, okay, that a lame of any sort, right, which, I have all kinds of acronyms for them because my channel is about being a human being, being a man, getting ish done, going out there, starting 10,000 companies and making $10 billion, right? And if you're not doing that and you don't have the virtues required for getting those kinds of things, you're a lame. I don't want to hear about you and your trouble and your whatever. And I don't want to hear you complain about women either or any of that kind of crap, right? Over here, we do man stuff, right?
Facts.
So 100% in terms of with Dr. Thunder there, right? In terms of people getting the shit together, getting in the gym, doing this, that, and the other, 16-hour work weeks. You can hear Kevin Samuels talk about it as well, that kind of stuff. So, what do you have to say in that regard? Is there a dearth, an aridity to the landscape, or for some reason I'm using obscure words, a lack of an inadequacy of this particular kinds of traits which I just mentioned in the men out there? Is there something that they need to do in order to adjust, or something?
I mean, I think honestly, say it's who is looking at it. So if you're looking at it to think that a man who's on his purpose, who's putting in all these work, 60-hour work week is a lame, then I mean, I personally don't look at that as a lame, as a lame guy. A man, because so we contradict ourselves as women because we want a man on his purpose. We want the alpha male. We want a man who's going to protect. We like that in men when they pursue a dream, when they pursue a goal, and they're so focused on their goal that we aren't the top priority. But at the same time, we say we want to be their top priority. If he's too busy, we complain. If he doesn't have enough time for us, then it's, oh my gosh, you don't care about me. We do contradict ourselves. We do contradict ourselves in that sense. So, I mean, and going back to the point where you said that, women being emotional and just not being able to make a decision, to make a logical decision. So for men to be too concerned about if you're perceived as a lame or not, because it's them if you stay on your purpose and you're a nerd on your grind, then you're considered lame, and then you're considered lame if you don't have ambition, or you're not doing anything, or you can't provide, or you can't offer the lifestyle that she desires. So the best thing to do is just focus on what brings you fulfillment. Focus on your dreams, your grind.
Amen, amen. I'm glad you said it, because I always say it in this channel, and those of you whom are regulars in this channel, you know it. Especially with men focusing on women. What does she think? Because it's like get the hell out of here. You're a total waste of time. You don't understand what life is about if you cannot find your center and your core within yourself to push. And if you don't have something that you're pursuing anyways, and the virtues that you need to pursue, to get those values, those similar to I mentioned, there's certain kinds of women I keep 10,000 miles away from me. I also keep those kinds of men 10,000 miles away from me. Purposeless people and so on and so forth. Anyways, Dr. Thunder, I think I had interrupted you before. Go ahead.
No, nerds win. I mean, if you can grind, if you actually have identified your purpose and you can put in these crazy hours, and everybody else is chasing girls and doing all of that stuff, and you, instead of doing that, are on your grind, eventually you're going to win. And part of it's this sort of principle that we see played out in high school.
You can't say that though, Dr. Thunder. I'm sure you know what I mean though. I'm like, but I'm just pushing back on that, because if you have in your head some kind of, you get what I mean, that cannot be the goal. That cannot be the winning. It's like, what do you just like? It doesn't matter. Like, there's a lack of zest for life with men, right? Generally speaking, that I find a certain kind of modern man, and they're always looking for something external to kind of validate them or something. And you eventually win. It's like, win what? It's like, it's you. You're doing you. Goddamn it! Who cares about these external validations and so on and so forth? But anyways, I'll let you continue.
So by winning, I mean,
objectively,
maybe
yes.
I should say we're going to be better off.
Yes.
Maybe that's a better way to put it. So I hear that. In high school, the people that are really popular in high school disproportionately tend to not do very well beyond that, because they peak too early. Now, you can always find exceptions to this rule, and often is the case that politicians were also were popular in high school. But usually the case is that you go back to your high school reunion 10 years later, and all of the people that were popular, they're all burned out, and it's just not the same. It's just not the same dynamic.
Damn, homie. In high school, you was the man, homie.
Right. But not anymore. Because the things that make you popular in high school, the swag, the chasing girls, the saying the right things in the right context, chasing that kind of stuff, that doesn't necessarily go well in college. And then 100%. It doesn't necessarily go very well when you get your job. and trying to work up in a company. They don't care about that kind of crap. So
Um, Let
yeah.
me read some super chats or acknowledge some super chats. Do you have Dr. Thunder? Go ahead and give us a little sound effect of your choice for 19 Bash in the building for the $5 super chat. There you
Down the
go.
Marco.
Blessings to the chat and to the movement. Keep the good content coming. And I believe that there is another. I did not ask you, Chantel, how much time you have. So,
Oh no,
you
you're
know,
fine. It's the end of the day.
okay.
So.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So, Jim Glory, thank you, or John. Yeah. I'm blind, by the way, in case you guys
I
have
can read it
noticed.
if you want me to.
Go ahead, please read it.
Salute to the chat. Great convo. Salute to Ike and Doc. Good evening to Chantel. Thanks for your insight. John Gilroy. Or Gilroy.
Yeah, and
Gilroy.
I thought Gilroy, and I was like, why did I say Gilroy? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. So let's do this. Yeah.
Okay,
I,
okay.
I did want to I
Go
did
ahead.
want to go back to an earlier topic, and this is actually the reason that I was like, man, I'm glad you dropped the link. And I wanted to push in a little bit on uh, the church thing. So I did a panel discussion on O'Shea Duke Jackson's channel a couple months ago, and it was my panel. It was two pastors, a couple preachers' kids, musicians, and then of course O'Shea moderated the thing, and he was a little he was a little um, he was a little apprehensive about doing it because he didn't know if it was going to be something that was going to really take off well. But we were on there for 2 hours, and we had 700 or 800 live viewers the whole time. The name of the stream was, black men have left the black church and are never or coming back. You know, and I think that sort of topic really resonates in the manosphere because there's a lot of black men that have felt, have been sort of alienated by the church. And as I think black churches have embraced more of this sort of feminist agenda, it has, uh, it has first, it has pushed, I think, black men out. But then also, I think it's contributing to this sort of miseducation of black women, right? It's sort of, you need to get out there and get your degree and get X, Y, and Z, so you don't need a man. So because you look in the black church and there's not a lot of men around, and
Mhm.
a matter of speaking, it's a tough spot because if you know that there is a dearth of black men that are available for the women that you're trying to protect and help and shepherd, in one sense, it does seem to be practical wisdom to try to encourage them to do something so that they can take care of themselves and they won't have to rely on someone else to take care of them. However, it seems to go several steps further than that because there's a lot of finger wagging at black men. Um, and so I, it's unfortunate, but I think that the black church has failed miserably, and until we start having these kinds of conversations actually in the black church, where we used to be able to have conversations about relationships, about the way that black men and black women are relating, um, and where it wasn't just the men that were getting the finger wag from the pulpit, but actually everybody was, was having sort of their, whatever their issues were, they were getting something for them. So, anyhow.
Mm. And
So
I
Chantel, you
think that's.
mentioned, yeah, you had mentioned earlier that you were encouraged to focus on your education and so on and so forth. So do you think that the reasons that Dr. Thunder gave are partially why that was done, or what is your experience? If you could rehash and kind of expand upon your experience in your church.
So my church was a very tight-knit church. We were non, and I'm referring to my church in Jamaica. We're a non-denominational church, and it was more like a family base. So the advice to, focus on your school and to not focus on boys and stuff like that. It came from more of a family. I'm protecting you. You're a part of our family sense. So now my church in Florida was more of a sense of waving a finger at men. Men have to step up, men have to do this, but no accountability for the woman. And then time and time we'll see women showing up pregnant, women showing up with multiple, like these city characteristics that it should be unacceptable. And then, we saw the men leaving once they hit 20 and they can make their own decisions, they're off to college, they just don't come back. And I think if the church, especially the black church, kept it fair, kept it balanced, stop point the finger at men, but also point the finger at women too. Then we will start seeing more men in the church. But Doc, you mentioned a point. There's money in this whole feminist movement. There's money in stirring up emotions through women, and we can see it in just these shows, these movies. So there's money in a pastor saying, "Oh man, you need to step it up," and then the woman feeling their emotions, and then they put a little extra in the donation plate because men, the pastor held the men accountable today. But if the pastor was supposed to say, "Woman, it's time for us to start losing weight. Woman, it's time for us to start being to stop being so combative, to listen to our man, to allow our man to lead," then you will see less money in the donation plate. So unfortunately, all of this is money driven.
I can't remember the last time. I'm in church every Sunday. I'm a minister of music at a church. And I grew up in church, and I've worked at several churches. I can't remember the last time that I heard the word submission said from the pulpit. The word submission. Now, that word is in the Bible, but I cannot remember the last time that I heard that word. It's probably been 20 years at least.
So there's something that I often thought about, which is submit to your husband, husbands love your wife as Christ loved the church, that kind of thing. Now, my way of thinking is to think this. I'm going to ask you, Chantel, that it is difficult naturally for women to submit. Okay? And it is also difficult for men to love. That is why that's why the Bible says, submit to women, and it says, love to men. So what do you have to say about that? That, in other words, I think that it's a good kind of understanding of men to understand the position that, just to get that point. Now, there are reasons why, and I think the reasons are kind of obvious. It goes to the whole emotional thing again, right? So, because men will fall in line easily in terms of a hierarchy, they tend to fall in line to an order and a hierarchy, but women not so much. So, would you agree with that? That it is naturally difficult for women to submit? It's not an easy thing for them to do. It's not natural at all.
Yeah, to think about it like that. I honestly never thought about it like that. Like our emotions, it's to fall in line, to follow the path, and to not question it, or to not allow our emotions to influence how we feel that day. It probably will make us difficult to submit, because submitting does require you to fall in line, to follow the orders, and I'm using that loosely, woman, to follow the orders of your man. So if our emotion, if today I feel as though like, oh, I'm having a bad day today, and then I don't want to follow your orders, my emotions are telling me something completely different. So thinking about it like that, then yeah.
100%, because I like to look at things from the let's just call it the negative side, the shadow side. I like a lot of shadow work. I like to look at the dark side of people, okay? Because I think that's where you can find a lot of the levers, if you will, what moves people, right? And the real things. In other words, you use people's selfishness and their dark side, in other words, to structure a society such that those dark sides don't come out and overflow. You want to appease those and keep those sides at bay. So I did a whole stream called Female Vices and Male Sins, for example, where I kind of juxtaposed the differences between the ways that we sin, right? Where men kind of sin in one way, women sin in the other way. And it's important to know, the temptations, the weaknesses, if you will, to use a particular kind of word, of each sex. Now, let me ask you this question. Is there any part of the sexual revolution, specifically, not the feminist movement writ large about work and freedom or right to vote, the sexual revolution, any part of that, any part of, sneaking to Cancun to get a piece of Tyrone and sneaking back and whatever, and being free in that kind of regard, any part of that that you like, you kind of. Hey, what would you have to say about? Because again, speaking of the dark side and speaking of these kinds of things, because I mean, someone is having fun with this thing.
Yeah.
We know Tyrone is, but anyway, so any part of this thing that you find that's congruent with your personality, let's say.
Personally, no, but let's keep it general with women. Women, as we mentioned earlier, women are emotional creatures. This whole sexual liberation, we think, oh, hey, I can just go off and go sleep with Tyrone and leave my emotions in Miami and go to Cancun and not think that it's going to affect me eventually in the long run, even if you know it or not. So this whole sexual liberation, that the slut march, all this walk that we would like to believe that we are as equal as men, with, at the end of the day, our creator created us as emotional creatures. So you're not able to separate your emotions from an activity that requires someone to enter in you in that sense.
I see. So it is in the long run, and speaking generally as you're speaking, it is not. It doesn't really benefit women. You're saying, and no matter, even if they might say it does.
Yeah, I mean, if no matter if you want to tell me that your jacket is white, like, I mean, you can say it's white, and okay, it's okay if you want to believe it, but at the end of the day, it's not. And I mean, the feminist movement did a thing with us where it tells us like, hey, if you say it doesn't matter enough, then eventually it won't matter. But at the end of the day, as Kevin always says, 2 + 2 is 4, no matter what you say, so, or believe.
And another thing I wanna ask is I wanna mention is this. There are several contradictions that we've talked about, right? We talk about the contradiction of, hey, I want to look up to my man. I've asked every woman I ask, no matter how, like, she 1 second ago she may be talking the most feminist, blah 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 blah, and I just say, okay, let's talk about your feelings now and your. It's funny how that changes. Like, your man, your ideal man. Are you looking up or are you looking down? Like, yeah, I want to look up there. I want to do that. And then it's like, okay, well, what is all this other thing you're saying then? How could you want to look, but at the same time you're guarded, you don't want to give him any, like, how can you look up to such a person that you're constantly fighting with? That's one kind of contradiction. There's another contradiction, which is this, that women would like men, the kind of men that they want. They think that, or they expect that man to have them, the women, as their top priority, right? But in reality, I don't really need to explain anything. The kind of man that has you as a top priority, he's a simp. He's a blue pill beta bitch ass nigga. Whatever. Like, so what is that whole thing about? What is that kind of contradiction going on? It's I want him to be my, but it's like no. The guy you're looking for, the kind of guy you're looking up, you need to understand, and it's kind of harsh to say this, but women are not our top. Our women even is not our top priority. How does that sound to you and to women? And what is give us some insights as to how that sounds and how women take that.
And I mean, and we shouldn't be men's top priority, because at the end of the day, if you're, as a man, a masculine trait, you're supposed to provide, protect us, right? If we're your top priority, someone whose emotion goes like this every day, as I say, once a month, we don't like you. Once a month. And if we're your top priority and you're constantly focusing on us, but our emotions and our feelings are all over the place, then it's going to throw you off your game. And I mentioned that in a live that I did about Russell Wilson. Yeah, Russell Wilson. And women want the Russell Wilson. They want that guy who is going to say, because he mentioned that Sierra is his number one, I'm losing her is his top fair or something like that. It doesn't, like, if you're focused on a woman who is not, because God created us to not be stable. As I said, our emotions are going up and down every day. If that is your top priority, if that is your focus, then it's gonna throw you off game. It's gonna throw you off your purpose. And I mean, women don't like to be completely honest. When a man, when he focuses on you 24/7, every minute, what are you doing? What are you doing? Where are you at? What are you doing? What are you doing? It kind of makes us feel as though like you have nothing else to do. At the end of the day, we like to compete. As I mentioned earlier about if you awesome, if you post a woman, then you have other women in your DMs because we want to compete. We want to compete for you. We want to compete for your attention. So, but if you're constantly giving us that attention, that it feels as though, hey, I have him. The spice is out there, and so we contradict ourselves a lot when we say, hey, I want to be my man's top priority. But then, if it's a man that's texting you every hour on the hour, it's like, do you have anything else to do with your life, sir?
You know what? I really appreciate that kind of honesty and insight there because and I'm glad that you laid it out there on the table. And now talking to men in particular, okay? And then I'll ask you what you think about this, Dr. Thunder. So, given that this particular fact, okay, that okay, number one, to the things I said earlier, which is no, you should have a core, and you should be watching my channel if you know, in order to build up that core, master your subjective consciousness, master yourself, master your quote unquote purpose in the world. Even I hate that be on your purpose type talk, but let's just use the shorthand for it. Be on your purpose, right? Master that kind of stuff, but then also know that there is a way to give. Yeah, I'm talking game now, ladies. Okay. There is a way to give a woman attention, right? That is akin to that meets the parameters of what Chantel just said, which is that makes it such that there's a competition. Okay, right? Now, some of us are intuitive types. In other words, I understand the principle, and then I just kind of figure it out. I just kind of play like I don't use recipe books and so on and so forth. But there are ways for those of people who like recipes to actually know, in terms of long-term relationships for men, how to play that game, right? How to play that game and not mess it up. How to not simp, right, Dr. Thunder? What do you have to say about that?
That's right. You know,
Let's go.
so Adam was the first simp. As in Adam and Eve. Adam was the first simp. Because look at what he does. He blames the woman and blames God who gave him the woman rather than taking responsibility. He's also tricked and he's pulled off of his purpose by prioritizing what his woman is saying from the directive that he received from God. Okay? So he's simping in all kinds of ways. And all men have that sort of temptation to prioritize women over our purpose. And of course, we know the saying, you know, if you chase women, you'll lose money, but if you chase money, you'll never lose women. Right? Now, the principle I think that they're trying to point out, of course, that's overly simplified. I could find some holes in that, but what they're trying to point out is that your purpose has to be at the top of your priority list, right? Because it's part of what's helping to build your house. It's building your house in the stability that you can provide for other folks, right? So if I am, for instance, prioritizing what my wife is saying over what my purpose is, then that might temporarily make her feel good, but I'm actually putting myself in a situation where I won't be able to, at some point, I may not be able to actually provide. So I would suggest, hope my wife is not watching. I I would suggest that your woman has to be third on your list. Has to be third. So number one, I would say, is your purpose. And I'm a spiritual person. I'd say God and my purpose are at the top. Um, wait a minute. What's my second one? So it's God, and then my purpose, then my woman. So there you go. Those are the
It's,
those are the three
it's
things.
like God, and then there's a vacant spot that could just be randomly filled, but and then the
That's
wife,
right.
right? And then you just leave a spot.
Right.
You gotta leave a buffer between God and your wife.
Now I've heard it said that, you know, your woman should be further down even than that, and I think that is that, you know, I would have an issue with that. I don't think that's conducive for a long lasting, a long term relationship. I think you have to have some sort of priority, but those two things must be on the top.
Okay, so
And
yeah, Chantel, go ahead. What were you gonna say? I'm gonna ask you to follow up.
so I think when a lot of women will hear that, like, "Hey, you're not the number one on my list," then they'll interpret that as, "Oh, I'm not important." But that's not necessarily the case. You are important. It's just that you're not number one on my list, and we have to really get an understanding. The number one thing on your list is your purpose. Without your purpose, there would be no protection, no provision, no security, nothing like that. So you need your purpose to be number one in order for her to have the traits that she desires from you. I mean, it just requires us women to remove our emotions when we hear men have these kind of conversations and think about things logically.
Because I wanted to. Well, how did you find this out? Because in a lot of my relationships from the past,
Mm-hmm.
um, because I'm a certain kind of guy. I do many different kinds of things, and a lot of women have always interpreted that as um, some kind of like, oh, why you're trying to fill a void, you
Mm,
know? Why do you, or some a woman have said like, well, why am I not enough, or something like
mm-hmm,
that, and it
The
is kind of
workaholic
strange.
thing is a popular thing.
mm-hmm,
Workaholic, like I'm a workaholic, YouTubeaholic, musicaholic, philosophaholic, everythingaholic. Like I'm just all out, right? All the way, all the time. I don't understand how to be anything else. And it's almost like, on the one hand, that's admirable. But on the other hand, it's almost like they don't actually believe that such a person exists. There's got to be something wrong with him. Like, yeah, what's going on? Is it all about attention? Is it all about like, or like, is he just doesn't, because he doesn't like me, or he's trying to fill some kind of void? He has low self-esteem, and that's why he has to prove to somebody. Like, were you able to come to this particular conclusion, which is the truth, right? And we do exist, and we do have things to do which have nothing to do with you. How did you come to this conclusion? How did you learn this?
Well, I mean, I self-reflected, and I did the trial and error, because I dated men who weren't on their purpose as much as they should have been, who was just with me 24/7. I mean, they want to be around me 24/7, and if I'm not around them, then they're questioning, okay, what are you doing? And I would always think, like, aren't you supposed to, like, aren't you supposed to be doing something? Aren't you supposed to be on your purpose? I shouldn't be your top priority. And I felt pressure being a man's top priority, because then it's like, okay, I have to make sure that I am perfect, because then if I'm not, and I mean, I've shared my story with my exes, and I blame myself, because these are people I attracted. But it gotten to the point, I was in a relationship with a guy who was like, oh, if you break up with me, then I'm going to end my life, like that kind of nonsense. So I felt that pressure of like, okay, you care about me too much, and it felt a strain on me. So that's when I realized, like, okay, the kind of man that I want can't prioritize me like that. He won't, me leaving him won't cause him to think, oh my gosh, this is the end of my life. And then that's when I started
Wow.
realizing, okay, if I want that kind of man, then I said, okay, I don't want this kind of man. So the opposite of what I don't want must be this kind of man, not the extreme where
Mhm.
he doesn't, months go by and I haven't heard from him, but the balance where it's like, okay, he can still stand on his own. If I decided in my feelings and in my emotions that I'm going to walk away, then he won't kill himself. And then that's when I'm like, okay, so it makes sense. It's just learning.
Yeah, no jokes, Doctor Thunder. We're like, damn,
uh,
you're making guys want to kill themselves out there. Damn, Chantel, what's going on?
This is back in the days, way back in the day.
Shozan, you've been quiet for a while there. Is it because you're just chilling, listening,
Yeah,
or we just here over talking and you don't have anything to add?
yeah. Couple things to add, but I will say I was just soaking up all the information, soaking up all the proverbial game, so to speak. But I will say Chantel brought up some great points. One point from a while ago she brought up, which I agree with, is some of the stuff. Not to go too back into relationship stuff, but some of that does have to do. A lot of it actually does have to do with movies and the media. A lot of those ideas we get, even not just like in the black community, but men, women, all that stuff is pretty much movie Disney stuff. So yeah, that was a great point. I'm mostly just soaking up game, to be honest. Soaking up information, I could say. You know.
Indeed, yeah. So again, to the guys out there, you need to understand this 100%, right? There is the part which is internal, which is need to go and actually have. I call it zest for life, because if you have zest for life and you have drive, or if you're people like Dr. Thunder, whom just knew like I want to be the best musician ever in the world since you were 6 years old and you practice the saxophone all your life, and now you're a professor at Ohio State University plus all these other things that you do. People like Dr. Thunder might not even understand that whole lack of zest for life that some people may have. But if you don't have it, okay, you need to understand that there's something wrong, right? That's the first thing. Like if you're not out there, if there's just something that you're doing, and it may not be like the Dr. Thunder type of thing where it's like they have this one thing. It may be someone like me where it's not one thing, but it is just this endless drive to produce. Just produce, perfect, perfect, perfect all the time, right? If you don't have that, you need to first fix that layer. Okay, fix that layer of software. Go in there internally. Go to a pastor. Go to a AA meeting or whatever. Give up some addictions. If it's video games, if it's whatever, go speak to a therapist, whatever it may be. Fix that, and then there's the external part, is which how do you play the game? Okay, and some of us are very good at playing games. Others need a cookbook, a recipe, and how to give that attention, as Chantel said, which is there's a balance, right? It's not just I'm just gonna draw it off and be completely cold, but there is a balance. There are games that one plays, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and go around, starting with Dr. Thunder. If you have any final thoughts on this, and then Shozan, and then our honored guest Chantel. Any closing thoughts on this again? Balance between nature on the one hand, right? Which we know that if we're out of our nature, as you alluded to initially, Chantel, that something is off balance, something's off kilter. You mentioned, not being fulfilled. You mentioned biological clocks, so on and so forth. And then there's the political project, the scientific project, the technological project, which says, hey, nature, let's push back against you. Let's give ourselves some freedom, some space, some ability to manipulate, some room to breathe, some room for human agency, right? So, any general thoughts from that particular theme, all through everything that we've discussed with regards to closing thoughts? The last overture, Dr. Thunder, what you got?
yes, thanks again for allowing me to participate on the panel. Um, Fascinating conversation, Ike. You're always enjoy your content. Chantel, appreciate what you're doing. On your channel, and so a lot of the issues I think that we have now are because we've evolved so much. Our culture, our systems, our technology has evolved so much and gotten so good that it actually has created a situation where women actually don't need men. They don't need men like uh, they once did for survival. Um, uh, and as Kevin Samuels has frequently discussed about the difference in physical strength that men have, uh, the difference in, uh, there's just a lot of capabilities that men have that women don't, and there's capabilities that women have that men don't. The capabilities that women have tend to really shine in the context of a family and in a group setting. Men can actually go out in the wilderness and survive by themselves, right? So I think some of the sort of mixing of the gender sort of roles in relationships is due to it's like it's almost like a good problem to have in a sense, because what it says is that we've evolved and we've created systems that are so good that it could create this sort of problem. um, but the problem for us as we're trying to sort of figure out how we're going to sort of operate in the new world and the new normal, in the new modern context, there's a lot of things that need to be sorted out. They have to be addressed, and it turns out that though our technology has evolved, what makes us human beings hasn't evolved very much. And so our design, men have certain tend to have certain desires, um, um, and women tend to have certain desires, and you have to try to find a way to bring those things together. Unless we, I think, find a good solution for this, I think. I mean, you see a lot of these statistics that show that women uh, more depressed or on medication and stuff, more depressed than at any time in history. But there's been more advancements, so it's an interesting problem. And at least having conversation like this, and I think more women like Chantel coming to the table and saying, "Hey, I recognize X, Y, and Z," and you know, I think that I mean, women are always much more going to be more effective communicating this kind of stuff to other women than men will be. That's for sure.
Hmm. Thank you very much, Dr. Thunder. The last point you made there is very key, which is that generally speaking, and I think I mentioned this in Chantel's channel, that generally speaking, you don't want to hear these kinds of things from men. It's going to come out harsh. It's men are going to talk the way men talk. So hence, the women who were saying, "Hey, you don't need no man, focus on anything, blah 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 blah." Same thing. Women need to also then tell other women, and yes, women like Chantel doing that is absolutely definitely part of the thing. But also Chantel mentioned that men should come out into the public square and also say what they think. And then this whole thing about technological, sociological, and economic advancements moving a lot faster than biological, shall we say, change and evolution, if you will. Hence, you cannot escape the biological needs. You cannot escape nature just because of certain political and technological projects that you may have. So thank you very much, Dr. Thunder. Always a pleasure. Mr. Shozan, any closing remarks regarding anything which we touched upon today?
Awesome. First of all, I'll say as always, thank you very much for having me on the panel. Positive shout out to you and to the guest as well. Thank you very much for, being a lady that brings up these points and, helps get the message out. As the guys just said, there's only so much they really want to hear from us. It's good to have your voice and everything on there. My final words would be, and this is something that even I need to remember as well. The goal is, as Ike and you guys have mentioned, that balance, like between men and women being different but corresponding parts. You know what I'm saying? Even with technology and social media, if we have a good head on our shoulders, for instance, just as a quick little thing, dating apps, right? Dating apps are only a problem if the people using them have these weird ideas from the movies and stuff like that. Things like technology and Instagram and all that, because a lot of times on the internet we bash these things. I think once we come together and have a certain mindset, these social media things are just going to be a way where we can find other like-minded people that want to move forward. So I do want to say, it's my final words, balance, and everything is supposed to be here. It's just a matter of what balance we have. Like, the types of men that women like, a balance of it. The type of women that us men like, a balance. Even social media, a balance. So I think once you reach a balance, we'll be in good shape. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shozan in the house. Always a pleasure. Thank you for your contributions. Always welcome here. And to our honored guest, Chantel, thank you very much. I think you've provided a lot of insights today. And you've been very honest. As you've seen people comment on it and also commend you on your honesty, your forthrightness, and your candor. And that's always highly appreciated. So, any kind of closing thoughts on this topic? I started out saying, well, do you agree that there is a tension between the nature and then freedom and equality. You said yes, and then we went right into it. We talked about how this tension manifests itself. What are the organs that distribute this particular kind of a notion? Socioeconomic factors were considered. Things about the interpersonal relationship between men and women, what men need to understand, what women need to understand. Any kind of overarching and complete, want to put an overture on it, put a cap on it, anything that you have to say. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, go ahead and click her name. Okay, for those of you whom are not subscribed to Chantel's channel, she's quite consistent. She puts out good content out there, nice, short, concise videos, unlike my 3-hour ramblings and so on and so forth. So you guys should definitely go ahead and click her at in the title, Chantel Simone, type it in or click that and go and subscribe. When you subscribe, you click the bell button and you click all notifications. That's what the algorithm needs. Chantel, the floor is yours.
Yes, and of course, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to have these uncommon and sometimes uncomfortable conversations with you, Ike. But the major takeaway is I had to take a step back and realize it's all about fulfillment. It's all about getting to the end of your life and saying, did I live a life worth living? And if you can honestly say that going on the path of being a modern woman and trying to compete with a man and trying to show one up on a man is going to give you a fulfilled life, then live your life. If you think you're going to find fulfillment from being a submissive woman, cooperating with your man, having kids, taking care of your home, then do that. I'm not using my platform to convince anyone that one is better than the other one. I'm just encouraging you guys to look within and really self-reflect and really decide. There's a book, I don't remember the author's name, but it's the top 5 regrets of the dying. And in that top 5 was not making the decisions that will bring you fulfillment. And we don't want to, Black women especially, we don't want to get to the end of our lives realizing that all of this was in vain. So really take a step back and, if you have to wave the white flag, if you have to come back to Black men and say, listen, I'm sorry, do what you have to do, but don't let pride stop you from having a fulfilled life.
Don't let pride stop you from having a fulfilled life. And there we have it. We have the capstone. We have the plaque. Go ahead and put it up and go ahead and also subscribe. And we will go out. I'm going to go out real quick here. I'm not going to play a track, okay, as I usually do for this one. I'm not going to play a track, but maybe I'll give, for the sake of Young Swift, I'm going to give you, Young Swift, a little short acapella of your Run song, right? How does the song go again? Run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the overrated Lord. Run, come, make we get it. Calling all your sons. In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what was behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking with the shifty eyes averting, is not a steady bubble, could either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble, from LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons will breach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. Hey, I say, run, run, come, make we get it, because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it, calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. You know what I'm saying? We're out and we will see you on Saturday. And we may be talking to Jay Ibrahim or whatever we may be doing, but we are out. Thank you very much. Peace.